Thank you all for joining. Very much looking forward to our panel on the EU and its eastern neighbors. My name is Louise van Schaik. I work at the Netherlands Institute of International Relations, Clingendael, and I'm joined by a fantastic set of panelists. The first is Dr. Anaïs Marin. She's an associate fellow at Chatham House for Russia and Eurasia program. She's actually really interesting because she's French, but she's affiliated with the British Institute and she lives in Poland. So she can bring to the table the perspective of at least 3 countries, but she's also really an expert on the region and also specifically, for instance, on Belarus. Then I'm joined by Thomas Iso Markku from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, a senior research fellow, and he's really specializing in European security and defense policy. So that's, I guess, where the deterrence and the policy action might have to come from when we talk about the east of the EU. And then last but certainly not least, I'm joined with Reinis Pozņaks. I hope I pronounce it correctly.
Perfect. And
you're a member of the European Parliament, and I learned that you were one of these peoples in Latvia with the invasion of Ukraine that immediately took action to really help the people in Ukraine. And this is actually how you engaged in politics. So this is probably an important motivating factor. So today, of course, we can talk about how bad the Russians behave. But it is a big country that is there on the map and is unlikely to be going anywhere. Unfortunately, perhaps for many of us, and also the regime is, well, as it looks like, quite steady. And even if, you know, my teenage son of 12 sometimes say, why don't they just shoot Putin? Probably it's, first of all, not so easy. But secondly, there's probably others waiting there to take over and with a similar positioning. So the idea of this panel was also really to examine what are the options for Europe to de-escalate Russia's aggressive behavior and how can we take the situation in a constructive way a little bit further. I've asked each of the panelists to make a short input comment first, and then that we have some time to respond within the panel, and then also to open up quite quickly to you so that we can have an interesting discussion. So with that, I would like to ask you, Anaïs, if you could say a few words of issues that you think should be brought to the table.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Chairperson, for your introduction. I'm very sorry because I will first have to contest a bit the title of the panel today. When I hear the word de-escalate, I feel that it's a bit of a concession to the aggressor. And this is something I cannot contend with. My belief is that de-escalating is definitely not the right approach. Russia, as we know, understands only the language of force. And de-escalating, offering confidence-building measures would be seen as a concession, an invitation to step up its own maximalist demands. It happened so many times in the past, and give Russia an opportunity to repeat its lies and disseminate its revisionist narratives about why the war started and who is responsible for it. And this is obviously the wrong way to go. What we must do, and we have learned in the EU to do it, is to deter and punish misbehavior with sanctions. We need to contain and roll back the aggressor, and listening to Mr. Putin when he says that this is a red line, this is a red line, this is a red line is not appropriate. Evidence has shown over the past 4 years now that in fact most of the red lines that were Putin's have been pushed back thanks to our capacity to stay true to our values and stand with Ukraine. I will not list all the materials which we have delivered. As we know, it was too little, too late, and that's why Ukraine is still not winning. But at the end of the day, this I think it's important to remind, just so that we don't de-escalate and let Putin go further in the escalation. Because as we know, it's part of Russia's strategic behavior. They have this notion of escalating to de-escalate. It's a strategy that has been there for ages. I will not go into that topic. Maybe we can come back to it during the discussion. But I think that what we miss also about Russia is that from their strategic thinking posture, there is no wartime or peace, no distinction between wartime and peacetime activities. Russia is in a state of permanent war on everybody, to paraphrase the title of a book by my colleague at Chatham House, Kerry Giles. And in this, the so-called hybrid threats or asymmetric warfare or active measures, all these under-threshold malicious and malevolent activities that Russia is targeting against us for siding with Ukraine, it's in fact a permanent feature of the strategic competition that Russia feels it is at with the West. It's a constitutive element of Russia's identity and foreign policy, and it's what determines its sharp power activities, meaning the continuation of war by other means, because in fact, in spite of this permanent conflict, Russia's logic is conflict avoidance. The objective of all these measures, all this war against us, this hybrid warfare and destabilization and FIMI, foreign information manipulation and interference, is for us, its adversary, to shoot ourselves in the foot and capitulate without a fight. And again, I think this is the wrong way to go. I think I've been speaking 3 minutes, so maybe I'll stop here. You asked for a provocative statement from the onset, and I have other things to say maybe later.
Thank you. And yeah, this is indeed a super interesting take. Maybe you could just say topics that you had in mind maybe to still add later on, so that people also can be provoked to maybe or encouraged to also ask questions in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now or later?
Yeah, maybe now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that it's very important what we heard this morning. There were very thought-provoking arguments in favor of building up resilience. It's one of the, I guess, 4 main ingredients that are necessary for European societies to resist the Russian strategic aggression that it's yielding against us. I'm very admirative of the Finnish whole of society approach of security. Because it helps to enhance preparedness at all levels. It's something people maybe in Latvia are familiar with because you're a frontline state. Me being French, I can testify that unfortunately we are very far from this. So waiving the nuclear deterrence capacity is one thing, but I think in this very specific debate, it's absolutely useless. It's one of the things that the French like to do, to hide the fact that, in fact, they are not prepared in terms of conventional deterrence, which is what is missing now, rather than nuclear. And again, societal resilience. So these 4 capacities, which I believe are the main tracks where we should build up our capacities or patch our vulnerabilities. It's 1, conventional deterrence by denial in the skies, at sea. We've been talking about it this morning. There are several obstacles to this. We are lagging behind in anti-missile defense, in anti-drone drones, on the issue of mobility for equipment, for troops. We've been hearing about an Erasmus for militaries. Well, it's more than time to implement it. Second, I would say, is the sanctions, accountability, lawfare dimension, which would include expulsing not only spies, but agents of influence of Russia, including when there are people from, well, we can say traitors. The European Union, the European Commission has recently established a new short list, blacklist of people holding an EU citizenship plus Russian citizenship to be on this list and get on a ban and having this a ban on freeze on assets notably, and not being able to come back into the EU. Third, offense. This is a topic that popped up at the last Warsaw Security Forum just a few weeks ago. At the Paris Defense and Strategy Forum, I've been hearing more and more this idea that since Russia is targeting us in the cyber field, we have to admit that its deterrents include developing our own offensive capacities, cyber capacities. That would include the capacity to police social networks. So of course we have there's an ethical and moral dimension to it. It's not the kind of things that democratic countries can do unchecked. We start with the DSA, but we have the right to be more proactive, and there's a lot to think about in that direction, I guess, as well.
All right, thank you. So a provocative statement at the beginning, but also some concrete ideas on how to operate. And I think that links also very well to the next speaker. Tuomas Iso-Markku from the Finnish Institute, because you specialize really also in the security and defense issues, and I think it was also really interesting what Anaïs brought to the table with regards to the societal resilience, and this is of course also something we saw in Ukraine, so that's also very crucial. You can have a big aggressor, but if you have a strong societal resilience, then that also helps. Please, Thomas. Yeah.
Thanks. I guess many of the things that I'm going to say already came up in one form or another in Anaïs's remarks. I think basically there are three things that are essential in terms of deterring Russia. The first one is, of course, supporting Ukraine. That means making the ongoing war as costly for Russia as possible, and making sure that the outcome of that war, whenever it is reached and however it is reached, does not encourage Russia to engage in further military adventurism. The second point would be strengthening European defense, and this has to happen in terms of concrete military capabilities. It has to happen in terms of defense industrial capacity. It has to happen in terms of military mobility, as was already mentioned. And it also has to happen in terms of personnel, which I think is a big challenge in many European countries at the moment. The third point I would like to make here is then enhancing the resilience of our countries and our societies in the face of Russia's hybrid influencing and hybrid warfare, but also the ability and the readiness to actually respond to Russian hybrid activities. Now, I don't have any very concrete proposals on how those responses should look like, but I think making Russia pay in a way for the things it does is crucial here as well. And I think on all of these 3 points that I mentioned, things are happening, but things are maybe not happening fast enough, and there are a lot of things that also divert our attention away from these three objectives. First of all, on supporting Ukraine, of course, the Europeans have been faced with the very difficult task of mostly replacing the kind of military assistance that the US provided during the first years of the war. At first, it seemed like the European states were really taking this seriously, but at some point, it seems that their enthusiasm started to decrease, which might also have to do with the kind of diplomatic push that the US made to end this war. Some European countries may have started calculating that maybe we can just wait and see what happens instead of continuing to support Ukraine and trying to bring a better outcome that way. On strengthening European defense, I also see that a lot of things have happened. In the previous panel, there was talk about the figures, the spending figures, and I mean, if you look at Europe's total defense spending, there's definitely a very strong increase, and I think a sustained increase. But of course, as was mentioned in the previous panel, this is very unevenly distributed across the European countries, and it also does not necessarily always translate into anything very concrete, and many of the projects that are now in the pipeline will take years to actually materialize. So we would have to come up with ways to speed up translating that money into something more concrete. And then finally, of course, on enhancing the resilience, I think that's quite a difficult thing in some societies, in some countries, especially here at the eastern border of the EU and NATO. I think it's quite obvious, and it's already quite deeply rooted. In others, it's a lot less so, which makes them also quite attractive targets for Russia. And then when it comes to our readiness to respond to what Russia does in the hybrid domain, I think there is still the tendency to many times look at these as individual incidents instead of looking at the bigger picture, and also to work simply nationally instead of coordinating our responses. Mm-hmm. But that's for my opening statement.
Right, thank you, and super interesting. I'm super curious to hear, Reinis, Pozņaks, what you have to bring to the table. I wanted to make use also of this opportunity, maybe if you could also, either in this statement or later on, respond to some of the suggestions already made. For instance, should we have an offensive cyber strategy, but also playing a little bit more the devil's advocate. The Russians love their children too, perhaps, and the children they kidnapped from Ukraine. But yeah, how can we still work maybe with forces in society in Russia, or is there still something we can do? Because I tend to agree with you, Anaïs, but yeah, this picture of de-escalating as not being possible is also maybe something a bit hard to swallow. So is there also something in that regard that we could possibly consider?
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Now it's very difficult for me because 99% of what I wanted to say is already said, and I will not repeat it, but Yeah, when it comes to Russia, it's sometimes maybe, especially for those who don't know them very well, as we do in the Baltic countries, it's sometimes difficult, like, to really accept their mindset and their way of thinking, and actually, but when you look deeper into Russian, like, culture, I would say, and like analyze the, for example, sayings, and it's quite, you can see quite a lot how they think, and there is a lot of like sayings which include that basically power is everything, and the only form of respect they understand is fear, and like, for example, if who is the stronger, he is right. So basically, and that's how they act in all levels. I grew up in Soviet Union 13 years, and I remember this culture on the street level, and it's the same, like on the political level, and that's how they act. And I think one of the issues for Europe is that we don't have any, like, strategy, like winning strategy. We don't know where we want to end, what we want to happen, like the Russian regime collapse, or just they move out of Ukraine and like we are back to normal, or any other, what's our goal? And if we don't have like a goal, it's also very difficult to like to give resources for that and use them effectively, because of course one of the things we all understand that Ukraine's military like success is one of the key factors to that thing to happen. But again, we need to like clearly say what we want to achieve with Russia, because it's quite clear for us, at least, that if this regime will stays in Russia, then it's just like passing the issue to our children, like, and that's why maybe we quite often been called Russophobes, but we just know them very well. About the Europe, again, I think one of the big issues we still have in our mindset, and what Ukraine was a perfect example, that there is no military and civil world when it comes to war. So basically these two parts very heavily rely on each other, and but we still have this mindset or thinking that if something happens, like our militaries will fight and we will sit at home and watch on TV the news how they are doing, but that will definitely not be the case. So, and I think because the strength, the high spendings, it's a very good thing, but the strength is not the weapons themselves, which is of course a very important factor of strength, but the readiness to use it, readiness to fight, and that is, I think, one of the issues for Europe, that we are not showing that we are ready, and it's also. When it comes to support to Ukraine, we sometimes, like some at least countries maybe are afraid to like give weapons, because well, then we will be considered involved in the war, and that mindset needs to be changed. But again, the society is basically the key factor, or readiness of society to fight for their country, and for Europe is, I think, the key factor basically to stand against, especially big force, which you said that maybe they love their children but they don't. That's quite obvious. The mothers are sending sons to frontline just to make money. And that will not change so fast. So we need to be ready in all levels, and this like border between civil and military is gone. And I think that, or the future basically, the threats, not maybe so much that Russia will come in with like tanks and 1,000 troops, but with 1,000 drones, they can come in any day. And again, that deletes this line between war and peace times. We are basically in the war, not in like conventional phase of the war, but in hybrid, as it's called, war, and it takes the mindset to change again, because now we can see that basically civil and military cooperation is crucial to stand against it, at least. So I'm already talking too much. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And if you were in charge, so you would be writing this strategy on Russia, would for you be the ultimate objective that they leave us alone and stay on their own territory, and as long as they don't fight us, that's already the best we can achieve? Or should you still argue we should push for offensive cyber strategy, disinformation campaigns, and supporting Russian opposition to still provoke, let's say, also the change there that you saw when the Soviet Union collapsed?
Well, as I said, if regime stays in Russia, so that we will have this issue.
So it's not something we can really influence?
No, we can. Why not?
We can try.
We can try, of course. I said there is some key. The good news is that any regime collapsed at one point. Even Soviet Union collapsed. But I think we could do more. Of course, there is a couple crucial things. For example, as I said, I think one of the key factors would be Ukraine's success in the front line. And second, of course, any kind of different economical sanctions, which are working actually, and of course it cannot happen in 1 day or 2 days, but because the difference is Europe can openly say about some other regimes that they are bad, we don't like them, we want them gone, but not about Russia. Like, it's a bit, I think needs to be changed. And also when we talk about disinformation and hybrid, all the things, we are always in like defense mode, but you cannot win when you are only in defense mode, and especially when it comes to disinformation, because of course, as we all know, democracies don't do propagandas, and that's why we are only like in defense mode. But it's very difficult to achieve something only defending yourself.
So maybe if I can read the room, who of you think that we should go out and have more of an offensive cyber and disinformation policy towards Russia, so that the European Union should actively engage in that? If you raise your hand. Yeah, and those of you who didn't raise their hands, why not? Anyone who wants to go in? Yeah.
I will just add a short comment to be precise. I don't think that we need to do disinformation campaigns, or benefited that we can do information campaigns to about the Europe.
Anaïs, would you like to add or something? Oh, there's also someone over there. Yeah.
I just wanted to at least represent that silent part of who didn't raise their hands. I was thinking that we already do actually in European Union with our development policies, for example, in African continent, by doing good things and showing the benefits of democracy and human rights, we are actually fighting this disinformation, which is very active also in this region. So
yeah. So in other parts of the world, we're actually already doing it.
Well, just one example to this. For example, Moldova. And there is like one super pro-Russian region,
Transnistria.
No, not Transnistria, Gagauzia. And how it works, how they do it and how they use it. Basically, 80% of investments in this region come from European Union. All the roads, the bridges, everything is built by the European Union. But when they come to elections and pro-Russian candidate like comes on and makes the commercials that all this beautiful infrastructure is because we are friends with Russia. And that's how they work, and we do not respond anyhow. Yes, we are doing things but when it comes to information field, they are openly using it against us, and we are doing basically nothing about it. That's how it works in real life.
No, I think we had a visit of Maya Sandu at our institute in December, and she also, was telling about the experiences they have, and we can all learn from that. And of course, also the Ukrainians have the same stories on how their phones are being hacked, how people are paid with cash money to do things, and it's just quite remarkable. I wanted to ask if there is a point that you want to respond to one of the other speakers. Yeah, Anaïs? Yeah.
Yeah, apologies because I launched this, offensive cyber capabilities.
No, yeah.
Just to specify that, indeed, I don't think it should be an EU thing. It's better sometimes for the EU to stay away from things, because otherwise it makes too much paperwork and less action. Of course, some countries are already active in offensive cyber response to Russian attacks. Just they cannot really show it, but it's common knowledge. The Americans do it. Estonia does it. So it's not a question about the size. It's probably, yes, preparedness, having the little geniuses who can, whom you can take from, instead of them playing on the darknet doing nothing useful, that they go and protect their country, indeed.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks. I would have some questions, but I first wanted to look at the audience. Is there someone who wants to raise a question? Yeah, there are 2 questions. Maybe you can ask them, both of them, and then we go back. Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Simon Lightfoot from the University of Leeds. The UK has been searching for a global role post-Brexit. Has it got that role via Ukraine, and with what success? Thank you.
Okay, and then we do the second question, please.
Yeah, my name is Einar Semans. I am from Institute of International Affairs. And my question is going to Dr. Marin, because you are a well-known expert in Belarus. So, as to Latvia, Mrs. Tikhanovska just now was now in Latvia. She visited. And Latvian position is strong normative position. It's a strong normative position. So, to isolate Lukashenko regime and to support democratic forces of Belarus, because Belarus still is co-aggressor. But repressions are going on in Belarus. There are hybrid attacks coming from Belarus. So, in diplomatic terms, we are in the position of so-called strategic patience. So, my question is classical to that about Belarus. How do you evaluate now our European Union position towards Belarus strategy, taking into account American activities, let's say? You know what I mean. And maybe what kind of scenarios you see of development in Belarus, possibilities of regime change, so on. Very wide question, sorry, but you're an expert, and thank you very much.
Will he ever go away? Yeah, thanks. I take the prerogative of the chair to add the third question, maybe also to you, Reinis Pozņaks, because what I found remarkable for today is that I heard already the other MEP earlier today on the budget, and others being a bit critical about the Green Deal. And I work a lot on energy. I've worked on energy for about 20 years. I was lectured very often, or 25 years ago, about people who would always tell me that the energy relationship with Russia was a mutual relation, especially the people from the private sector, and that it would also create, interdependence between Russia and Europe. So I've always felt that also the climate policies and the green policies of the EU have been part of this strategy to move away from this energy dependency positions on fossil fuels that we import, and that it was perhaps even just as important as the contributions that these decarbonization policies make to the climate fight. But I find it remarkable that my impression is that if I'm here in the Baltics or in Poland, that this is not seen in a similar way, whereas in the Scandinavian countries it is. So maybe a few reflections on, let's say, also the energy, and I think also the energy sourcing of the military is increasingly recognized as Achilles' heel, because you can have all these modern warfighting machineries, but if you don't have the energies to fuel them, then they're also not so useful. Thank you. So let's go to you. Let's start with you, Anaïs, and then to you, Thomas, and then to you, Reinis, again. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Since you had 2 questions, I will not tackle the UK one, although I find it very interesting. So regarding Belarus, it's very good news that Latvia has a consistent policy vis-à-vis the country, vis-à-vis the regime, and vis-à-vis the opposition. It is what it is. No opposition in exile can be perfect. It is actually very representative of the diversity, and this is very democratic. There are several oppositions within the oppositions. So it's a lively civil society in the making. They just need to be back in Minsk and in power, and I don't see when that's going to happen. That's maybe for your second question. But I guess your first question was about this, where do we stand now with sanctions also, given that there has been now a decoupling, I would say, within the so-called collective West, since the Trump administration has engaged in is re-engaging with the regime. And here I think that for once it's actually good to have this division, almost like a division of tasks. Because we in the EU, well, strategic patience is okay, but we shouldn't just sit back and do nothing. But we have no reason to lift the sanctions. From my perspective, as you mentioned, the activities I had before in the field of human rights, in the UN, there is no word about sanctions, right? It's unilateral coercive measures. It's not allowed. But you know what I mean. The repression that the government of Belarus has been targeting all dissenters, all dissidents with could amount to crimes against humanity. So there is absolutely no objective reason to change our approach. And therefore, if sanctions were implemented because to signify the EU's dissatisfaction with these repressions, then there is no reason to lift sanctions because repression continue. When the Trump administration manages to have 100, 200 political prisoners being liberated, it's of course very good news. I'm very happy. I've seen so many friends come out of prison alive, and I'm so happy to see them alive at all. I didn't imagine I would see them again. This is obviously very good news. But we have to remember that in the same time, the Lukashenko regime is jailing as many people, is continuing repression, and those who are still behind bars are subject to inhuman treatment, which could amount to crimes against humanity. And that's why I commend the work that has been done by Lithuania of submitting a state referral to the International Criminal Court, alleging of this crime of repression and deportation, because as a result of the 2020 human rights crisis, and to this day, the regime is committing this crime of deportation by causing a mass exodus. We're talking about up to 1 million people who were compelled to leave the country. And the ICC has recently replied positively that it agrees that it's worth starting an investigation. So it's not the kind of things we can talk about with the United States, since it doesn't recognize the ICC. What they do is another policy of re-engaging in a transactional way. And here I think that Mr. Trump and Mr. Lukashenko are the same kind of political animals. So let them talk in their language. If it can achieve some liberations, of course, we can only be happy about it. As for the prospects for regime change in Belarus, it's very difficult questions. We can talk about it for several days in a row, but shortly. We used to say that there can be no change in Belarus for as long as there's no change in Russia. I don't see any democratic change coming in Russia. In recent years, the approach has shifted a little bit, and now we say like there cannot be positive change in Belarus for as long as Russia doesn't lose in Ukraine, right? So like the democratic opposition in exile has been a strong supporter of Ukraine, and sometimes it was a one-way relationship, one-way love. It's changing a bit, and I'm happy that the Zelensky administration is now a bit more considerate towards the Belarusian opposition and distinguishing it from Belarus in general, because if you look at polls, opinion polls, Belarusian population is in majority hostile to this war and would definitely not want to be co-belligerent, but of course it is indeed a co-aggressor, but this is the fault of the regime which has put itself in this dead end. And when the person responsible for this dies, because it will happen at some point, it will be a very difficult time for Belarus, because indeed it can go in both directions, but I don't have a crystal ball.
Thank you.
Yeah, right, thank you. Maybe move onwards to you, Thomas. Yeah.
Thanks. I'll start with the UK. Not sure about the global role, but regional role in the Nordic Baltic region, most definitely. I think Finland, and I would assume that goes for the other Nordic Baltic countries as well, definitely looks up to the UK as a potential major player in this area. The Joint Expeditionary Force is seen as a very important forum, but also as a real tool, not only as a political forum. So there's definitely potential for that kind of a regional role, and this has certainly become only more relevant with Finland's and Sweden's NATO accession. But of course, there are some questions about the military capacity of the UK. As far as I understood, the military has been quite, or is running on very thin resources. It looks still quite impressive on the surface, but if you dig deeper, there are certainly quite a few challenges there. And then there are, of course, also some uncertainties when it comes to the political stability of the country at the moment, and also its economic prospects. But then again, those two last points also go for many other European countries. The role of energy policy and the green transformation in terms of security, yes, I think that's definitely, like in Finland, energy policy is definitely thought of as part of this overall package of comprehensive security, attaining at least a high degree of energy self-sufficiency, which can only basically be reached through renewables, is definitely a high goal. Of course, today it's very difficult, almost impossible to completely shield yourself from the global supply chains. In renewables, there are other kinds of dependencies that come along with it. But definitely, I think from the Finnish perspective, energy policy is part and parcel of comprehensive security. Then I would like to highlight something that Reinis said that I definitely agree with, which is that military capabilities alone, of course, do not solve anything, and readiness to actually defend your country is certainly a big problem in Europe. There's just recently there's been some polling in several European countries with regard to the population's readiness to defend their own countries, and at least from a Finnish perspective, where the level is high, the results in many countries are quite alarming. Now, as a Finn, of course, I see conscription as one way of like enhancing that willingness to defend your country, because it just familiarizes you with the kind of possibilities that you have to engage in defending your own country, and I think debates about conscription will become more frequent also in those European countries that do not have any kind of a conscription system going forward, as we already have in Germany, for example, where the issue has been kicked down the road a bit, but I'm certain that it will stay on the agenda, and they might have to revisit the decisions they have taken thus far. But that's all from me at this point.
Thank you. Well, maybe just from the Dutch perspective, I think most of the teenagers in the Netherlands think they can still take a gap year. So I'm really, the polls are not very good on the preparedness to fight in the Netherlands. I'm a mother of 2 sons. The youngest one is keen to go into the military, but the oldest, not sure. The Netherlands definitely still looking at the UK for the leadership, and also, for generally, we would love to see the UK return to the EU.
I'll just add to UK question, because that is one of the issue of EU itself, that EU sometimes forgets that Europe is a bit bigger than just EU. And for me, it's very difficult to imagine like security and safety of Europe without UK or Norway, for example. And there is quite a lot of debates and fights inside the parliament, in all kind of programs where the money are involved, especially like that the EU taxpayers' money should stay in EU, which is maybe kind of understandable, but again, I'm always saying I have office in the European Parliament, there's a lot of buildings in the name of people. I have office in the Winston Churchill's building, so I'm always telling I have office in the Churchill's building, so I cannot accept that we exclude the UK from all of the programs. And at the end, I think things are moving to the right direction. Because EU has the list of countries with which they have strategic security partnership contracts. So why have those contracts if you not include those countries into the military industry programs and that kind of things? But it was very interesting at the beginning, 2 years ago, that the kind of mood between EU and UK was just after divorce, when 2 exes still are emotionally angry on each other. It's your fault, no, your fault, you did that. But now it kind of moves away and comes back to good and practical relationship. About the Green Deal and energy, of course, first of all, it's a topic about which sometimes it's very difficult to have any debates in the public, because Russia is actually using it very actively in disinformation and radicalization campaigns. So when you use one or other arguments, you quickly become or Kremlin or Russian gas lobbyist or that kind of things. But I think that the issue with Green Deal was at the beginning basically that it was all the goals were settled basically political and ideological goals without any calculations in background, what is real and what's not real, and in how long time it will take and money. So of course no one argues that we need to take care about the climate and environment, but the question is about the common sense, basically, what we can achieve and how, and I think that is a bit coming back. But when it's about security and safety, of course it's a crucial thing, energy in safety and security, but now we have another issue that we're like going away from Russia, dependencies from Russia, but we end up in dependencies on China. And that basically the European green energy industry is now ringing bells in the European Parliament quite a lot that of course they cannot compete with China. And we have actually the good example in communication. We have this 5G toolbox, which basically gives the tools to the countries to exclude, Huawei was the example, but basically to exclude China from some critical components in the infrastructure, and they are basically asking to do the same in energy sector. So there is also quite a lot of security issues with that in this renewable energy sector, and we need to start to do something about it quite quickly, otherwise we'll be too late.
Yeah. Well, maybe I also recognize this very much, and it's also true, but of course it's also a different dependency, because the critical raw materials and the solar panels, you have them once and then you produce your energy, and with the gas and oil you need it all the time to burn your energy and have the energy. So it's a different, in a way, different dependency, and also I think we still overlook a bit that also these fossil supply chains have all these risks. Well, we see it now clearly with the Strait of Hormuz that's closed. But also the attacks, of course, on the energy infrastructure, and also that's actually an effective way of the Ukrainians to attack Russia by, putting their refineries, their oil storages and pipelines on fire. And at a certain point in time, they couldn't even fuel their cars anymore in certain parts of Russia. So that was also, in a way, quite a successful offensive strategy. But anyways, it's a bit of a side topic. I wanted to look around if there are still questions, maybe some of the younger people, so don't hesitate. If you have something on your mind, please bring it to the table. This is your chance. Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Linnea. I'm from the Swedish Embassy here. And I had a question regarding what role you see that the EU could or should take in relation to securing the eastern border more in practice.
Okay, thank you. And other questions? No? Okay. Okay, then I have one final question at the end, but I first leave you answer this question.
Well, I think it's very clear what my answer will be, because the approach that the borders are issue of the countries needs to be changed as up, because of course we have the border of all the European Union. Yeah, so of course I think it's a common problem of EU. All the borders, of course, we get a lot of complaints from the south countries that we need this 360 degrees approach, which is basically true. I think it's sometimes a big mistake, to argue that no, we have bigger issues. You need just take care of eastern border. That's true. We need to take care of all the borders. It is a common problem, and yeah, so EU borders are EU borders.
Right, I think you in Finland have also a pretty long border with a specific country.
Yeah, I think Finland has expressed quite a strong interest in the idea proposed by the European Commission of this so-called Eastern Flank Watch, which would also include especially anti-drone systems and the most recent events that we have seen, like several Ukrainian drones coming into Finnish airspace, only highlight the importance of this kind of initiatives. And even though there has been quite a lot of criticism towards this initiative within the EU, with some countries saying that there should be anti-drone systems everywhere. I think it's still the frontline states that actually need this. I mean, you can have anti-drone systems elsewhere as well, and they will probably need it, but still at a larger scale, it's the frontline states where you actually need them, and that's definitely an interesting scheme. But I think the prospects of this project to materialize are still quite uncertain. But I'm.
And are they made in Europe? These systems?
That's also completely unclear at this point. But I think that's something that all the frontline states are probably quite interested in.
No.
You want to add something?
Yeah, well, I could talk about like the fact that we should buy drones from Ukraine actually now and learn how to use them and teach our children how to use them, but that's another story. Now I wanted to come back on the notion of conscription, because I see there are many young people here, so thank you for bringing up Sting. You know, there was this song in 1985 by Sting about the Russians love their children too. In fact, they do, but they do teach their children to hate us. And this is something we have to know. This is something that has to be shown, that has to be said, because we cannot expect our young people, my sons, to go and want and fight. And that's why I think, for example, the French chief of staff made a mistake when he said, like, he warned us that, yes, the French young people should know to, be ready to die for their country. It's not exactly this. It's you have to be ready to kill. And this is a philosophical question that we don't ask anymore. Yeah. And about this conscription, of course, both are bad. You know, we would prefer to be living in a peaceful world, but just Russians won't let us at peace, and they are not the only ones. So indeed, we have to step up and defend our values. And here I would disagree with Thomas about conscription. I'm the last generation in whose class there were in France boys, it was boys only at the time, going to do their national service. So it's been more than one generation of since the military service has been cancelled in France. So we have a professional army, and this is good like this, I believe. And in any way, they have just did the maths, and there is absolutely no way we could reinstate conscription and feed all these young people and lodge them in barracks for 1 year or two. That's just impossible. It's not realistic. However, what we have to understand, and this could help raise interest in these professions, in this endeavor, you know, defend your country, is that first, a conscript would never die for his country. It's not the idea. The idea is that conscripts would come and fill in some positions in the army that then would liberate professional military men to go and fight and die for their country, because they engaged for this, they signed for it, and they're well trained since long enough time to do it. We're not indeed Russians. We don't send our children to the meat grinder. And that some of these jobs, we mentioned cybersecurity, but like some of these jobs are absolutely non-lethal, you know. It's and nowadays we need capabilities, and we need competences and talents in every profession, in every and this is something we were taught when I was a kid, is that when you had, you know, kids who were not very good at school, like, you will go to the army, you will learn a job at least there. And that's I think this idea that we should put it in a positive way. So if the EU can do it, let's have it a good, you know, advertisement campaign. But it's all very national anyway. It's because you have to be integrated. Nonetheless, you have to have perspectives when you leave the army, when you're finished with conscription. But you would be then in the reserve, and this is what we need. And this is what the Ukrainian example shows us: is that when we are at war, when we are eventually invaded, or when we have to step up our mobilization, it's extremely important to already have these hubs and groups, and I know the Balts are doing very well in that. You have regiments, you have a very developed reservists, and so does Finland. And this is where, you know, the French will absolutely be of no help, and I'm sorry to say the Brits either.
Well, in the Netherlands, we have actually the Queen and the Crown Princess now entering the reserve, and that helps as a huge boost for the efforts because we're in exactly the same situation as France. Your last words.
Yeah, okay, now, but basically what I wanted to say is that conscription is not the only solution. We have our Zemesardze, Lithuania has the same, I think, or similar, and that was also Ukrainians' experience as a Terra Barona, which is basically volunteer reservists, because there's also one thing with Russia, that they don't pick the hard fights. I'm absolutely sure that there is two countries now in the world in which they will never ever invade again. One is Finland, and the second is Ukraine, because they know that it will be very difficult for them and will have a high price. And that's why it is important to show that we are ready to fight, and you are endangered from any building if you come into our country. About the drones, I'll just finish. That's also, I think, one of the problem with politicians, because the Commission also is talking about the drone walls and all that kind of things, but it's clear that it's impossible, because fight against drones will be always the race between drones and counter-drones. And even Ukraine, which is like now leader of the whole world in the drone area, they are not able to intercept 500%. And from that we come to the things that we need to even more faster work on civil protection. It's not an issue in Finland, but in all other countries it is a big issue. To warning systems, shelters, knowing what to do, because drones, I'm quite sure, will come, and we will not be able. It's not possible to create 100% security from drones. I know that because I wrote in the Parliament also the quite big report about drones and counter-drones. With experience for all over the world, including Ukraine and Israel, which has, I think, biggest experience in those areas. So we need to be ready for those moments when we will be behind in this race, and there definitely will be that kind of moments.
All right, thanks. Well, with that, we have to end. Time's up. I would like to thank the speakers, Anaïs, Marin, Thomas, Isa, Marco, and Reinis, Pozņaks. I think we covered a lot of ground in this session, and I thought it was really interesting. Thank you so much for the contributions. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So that's also with the Iron Dome in Israel now. Yeah.
Everything has its limits.
Yeah.
I love your intervention so much.